there isn't really, I don't think, a good process that every company has gravitated towards saying this is the best way to do it. And I think often tools do shape your processes. Each company has a different way of ideating and brainstorming and planning. That was maybe less of a problem before the pandemic because the in-person dynamic solved for a lot of the gaps in the processes. But I think they're becoming much more apparent in the post-pandemic world where you do need specific processes and tools introduced in order to make that explicit for teams to communicate better.
Hey, this is Brian, and you're listening to JAMstack Radio, a bi-weekly series where we discuss modern web development with maintainers, founders, and developers. JAMstack Radio is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. Welcome to another installment of JAMstack Radio. On the line, we got Shin Kim. Shin, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
Yeah, before we get into what you're working on, I'd actually want to know who is Shin and how did you get to this point?
Sure. My name is Shin. I'm based in the Bay Area and the founder of a company called Eraser. We make an online whiteboard for engineering teams. My background actually straddles finance and engineering. I studied computer science, got college and data science in grad school. But I started my career in finance, working with tech companies in the Bay Area. I worked on some pretty cool projects like the IPO of Match Group, which is the parent company of Tinder, and then also in VC investing. But a common thread throughout my career has been kind of a passion for tools for thought, whether it's Excel or PowerPoint in finance, or IDEs or Jupyter notebooks. I've always been fascinated by mastery of these tools that help us think through complex ideas as well as communicate them to other people. So and that's what led me to start Eraser.
Wow, that's awesome. And so I actually have a finance degree and then found my way into tech.
Wow.
Which is, I've shared the story publicly a few times, but I'm always fascinated about FinTech. I've already sworn off not going into that realm and touching that because it's a hard problem and it's for not the faint at heart. And I'm enjoying working the dev tools place. So
For sure. For me, I think that's, reinventing Excel is probably the idea that I've sworn off. I'm just, it's this trap that people in finance that, come over to tech kind of fall into.
That's funny because how I learned I knew how to code from copy and pasting, like in high school and college and stuff. But Excel is what got me into writing code full time because I was doing sales out of college with the finance degree. And the operations of setting up deals and doing macros inside of Excel, I learned all that to excel at my job, no pun intended, and got really went down the rabbit hole of learning how to properly code and build web apps. And it's a meandering path, and I'm super glad I made it here.
Yeah. No, it's I think it's a good gateway to actually programming and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And so you mentioned Eraser. That's what you're working on today. So do you want to give us the fuller pitch and what's the goal with it?
Sure. So Eraser is a whiteboard for engineering teams. What the product is we combine a Markdown note editor with a infinite canvas. And, we introduce a lot of engineering friendly primitives like code blocks, cloud icons, diagram as code, and keyboard based diagramming, which differentiates it from, the general whiteboards that you may see out there. And we are particularly more relevant in this, remote first hybrid world. And the two main types of use cases are really the real time, which is brainstorming, ideating, as well as system design interviews. And on the async side, we have planning documents or documentation, architecture documentation documents that Eraser is used for. We launched in March of 2021, so a little less than a year and a half ago, and over 1 million people have used Eraser so far. So, really excited by how it's going.
Wow, congrats. That's quite the feat. But it's also a very great problem to be solving too as well, because as folks went remote, I think one of the jokes I made early on in the pandemic was how Google was doing interviews, and because the missing out on having the whole whiteboard. Turns out there's a lot of whiteboarding tools out there as well. And I discovered them all. And because I do a lot of live coding and try live coding on Twitch specifically, and try to basically unblock my design, architecture and planning live on the air by also collaborating with other folks. And it sounds like that is one problem that Eraser is solving, but I'm curious, like, what's the other stuff that Eraser is solving as far as, the feature suite and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think, even in that live collaboration use case, I think there's actually a lot of unsolved problems, I think, compared to when, we were all co-located in the office and inside of a conference room together. We do a lot less drawing. And I think it's because, you have to open a whole app, you have to send a link, you have to ask, are you there? Can you see me? And then you start drawing. And even then, it's not like having a marker and having to go at a whiteboard. There's a learning curve. And I think it's exacerbated by the dominant, whiteboards out there, whiteboard softwares out there being, so general. They're trying to be everything to everybody. And so, on their apps, on their primary interfaces, you'll see like 30 buttons. And you're like, whiteboard's supposed to be simple. But the reality of the apps today that it's not. And I think the big reason why that's the case is because it is general. And, that's why we're trying to build something that's specific for technical users, focusing on concepts that are relevant, and also introducing ways to do common things that you have to do as an engineer or a technical person really quickly. Whether that's, we can go into some of these a little further, but, we have a slash command where you can kind of, it's a universal launcher to put in, say, a Kubernetes icon or S3 icon, and diagram as code, which gives you a DSL to really quickly generate sequence diagrams and ERDs. Super painful to create if you're doing that from scratch.
Yeah.
And then even for flowcharts, just one click drawing of flowcharts or using keyboard shortcuts. So I think the first part is kind of focusing on making things go faster, being really able to, you mentioned your, Twitch live streaming use case. If the tool slows you down, it's kind of a conversation killer, right? Like if you can't really draw at the speed that you want to communicate, I think a lot of people just abandon the tool and they just, use other medium. The second thing is really process. I think, as we switch on to remote work, companies are needing to adopt different processes, and async culture, a writing culture is often talked about, and I think we fit into that. I think it's a continuum. If you think about ideation and brainstorming, and then planning, and receiving feedback, and then documentation once you're done with your task. And there isn't really, I don't think, a good process that every company has kind of, gravitated towards saying this is the best way to do it. And I think often tools do shape your processes. And, each company has a different way of ideating and brainstorming and planning. And I think that was maybe less of a problem before the pandemic, because there were, the in-person dynamics solved for a lot of the gaps in the processes. But I think they're becoming much more apparent in the post-pandemic world, where you do need specific processes and tools introduced in order to make that explicit for teams to communicate better.
Awesome. Yeah. And then I alluded to this too as well. Like during the pandemic, I had gone through the gambit of like quite a few different tools. It was more of like the situation I was not really working on a specific team, but I do have the regular chatters on Twitch that show up consistently. And every time I had to go sort of whiteboard and map out, okay, this is what we're going to build. This is how I'm going to approach it. Here are the features. It was like, oh man, what tool am I going to use? And I know Google has like Jamboards, and there's Miro that came out of nowhere, kind of a huge company. FigJam is the one I kind of centralized on, mainly because I already have Figma design templates, which I'm not a designer. I just happened to learn Figma during the pandemic. And I think the one thing you had mentioned that really was aha for me is like having quick shortcuts for engineers to model things out, like kind of it takes the cake for all those things that I've mentioned, because like as much as I'd love to put a Post-it note and a FigJam, I don't want to do that anymore to sort of architect what I'm trying to build. But Post-it notes are easy squares for me to grab.
Exactly. And I mean, if you were to really boil down, I think the first generation of successful web whiteboards, like a Miro, which is the 500-pound gorilla in our space, and I think FigJam is going head to head against Miro. The killer use case, I think, is really sticky notes. And if you look at their interface, it is often the most prominent button. It is, often very much emphasized. And so, I totally empathize with you there that, if you're using one of those tools, that's kind of the main, tool that you're going to be using to communicate. And if you think about it, I mean, sticky notes are great, but it's not always the thing that, you know, solves your problems for engineering communication. And so, you know, that is, you know, a paradigm shift. If you come from, you know, those apps to erasers that, you know, really try to make it easy for you to do the everyday things and do it in a, like, you know, 1-click or 2-click way. You know, I mentioned the icons earlier. All you have to do is, you know, press the / key and then, you know, type in S3 AWS, hit enter, and then you get an icon. And so, you know, it's simple things like that. But then again, because these whiteboards have grown so, you know, sprawling in their use cases that they support, there's menu trees and carousels that you have to go through to find the thing that you're looking for as an engineer. And again, you know, that just doesn't work very well in a live conversation.
Yeah, the wheels are turning right now. So I'm currently, I haven't been as public around this, but I'm currently writing a book for Manning. And part of that process is like you have to do some figures and diagram and essentially whiteboarding, but inside. What I've been using is Keynote as my tool of choice to make squares pretty quickly in shapes. But now I'm like thinking, oh, wow, this would pair really well with the book that I'm writing, to diagram all these examples and then ship screenshots. So like, what's the collaboration look like with the Racer? So do I have my team join? Can I export some of these whiteboards and import these in my documentation?
Sure. Yeah, no, collaboration is a big piece of, you know, what we're trying to solve for at Racer. I think there were traditional diagramming tools, maybe like Draw.io or Lucidchart, that had less of a focus on collaboration and, you know, were built from day one as a collaborative tool. There's, first of all, the real-time collaboration. All you have to do is just, you know, copy paste the URL, send it to somebody, and they can immediately join. I think that's one of the differentiators as well, that we actually don't require collaborators to sign up or create an account to be able to join and make edits. So it's super easy. You know, whether it's in an interview or a live Zoom call, like, you can just, you know, send a URL. The other way is, you know, commenting as you would do on Figma or Google Docs. You can just leave async comments if you're soliciting, you know, feedback in a more async way.
Okay, excellent. I have a use case literally tonight because I'm actually creating some diagrams, and I've never liked using Keynote for creating that, but it's like once you have the hammer that you can solve the problem with, like I've probably been using Keynote because of doing talks and conference talks and stuff like that. I can create a quick diagram inside of Keynote, so I guess I can do that same thing, grab a screenshot, share that inside of like a markdown file on a GitHub issue or something.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and I think you're not, you know, in the minority even, you know, when you say, you know, use Keynotes, you know, just talking to a bunch of engineers on, you know, what their favorite diagramming tools are. You know, everybody has a tool, but nobody has a tool that they love. And a lot of times, you know, more often than not, you'd be surprised to hear, you know, Apple Keynote or Google Slides, just because it's there and you know how to use it. And for Google Slides, it's real-time collaborative. But I think, you know, what we want to do with Eraser, because we're use case specific, you know, I mentioned things like keyboard-based flowcharting, but we want you to be able to build that muscle memory so that you get even faster, right? I think with a Keynote or Google Slides, the diagram building is not really going to get that much faster. But with us, you know, for example, we have a set of, you know, shortcuts that allow you to draw an entire flowchart without ever having to touch the mouse. You know, draw things, change shapes, move around. And again, that's just not something that you'll get in either a you know, presentation tool or a generic whiteboard that's not catering towards technical users.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely see the use case, and probably we do sprint planning every other Monday. So I think next time in a sprint plan, I'll forego the Keynote and actually pull up Eraser to give it a go. So I talked about embedding this, like taking a screenshot, embedding this into like a GitHub issue. I'm curious, where do you go from now? Like, how do you integrate this in like developers' workflow? Do you have an integration with GitHub?
Sure. That's something that's very front and center in our mind right now, in terms of our product roadmap. You know, so far we've been focused on the, you know, writing and drawing experience, the content creation experience, because I think that has to be really pleasant and just polished. I think, you know, where we go from here is really embedding ourselves into the workflows of teams in a more deep way. And I think the first place to go is definitely source control. So, you know, with a GitHub or GitLab integration, what we're looking for is, you know, the ability to be able to create, you know, diagrams and markdown notes, and then save it into source control, right? So that, our format, which is, Markdown, as well as, mentioned diagram as code, it renders it lends it well to, be committed to source control, and you can run diffs and things like that because it's not a binary format. And so, being able to save documents inside of source control, I think is number one. The other things that also become really interesting that you're able to do is, if you create a link between a file or a code snippet and an eraser doc, and the doc is documentation for how the architecture is or how the code behaves. When there is a PR that changes the behavior of a code or a file, you could run CI actions to validate the documentation and run alerts. And so I think kind of going from where we are today in the ideation, brainstorming, and planning world to, I think, even into the documentation world as we build these integrations. And obviously, I think, with GitHub, there's also the Kanban board, the issues, and, being able to bring in diagrams into those workflows too, I think is going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah. I'm excited to one, start using this thing, but also two, seeing how to what that integration looks like. Always happy to nerd out on that, seeing how my closest to GitHub and building integrations on the ecosystem as well. Previously at Netlify, happy to share notes there. So I'm curious, is there anything else you wanted to cover as far as Eraser and folks? How can folks get started? What's the mental model of folks reaching for this the first time? What are they probably looking to accomplish? Sure.
They're probably, I would say, in a conversation, and they're struggling to really communicate, an abstract concept, via just words, right? And I think that's a really good time to grab Eraser. All you have to do is go to tryeraser.com, click on the Try Now button, and then you'll immediately, without any sign up or anything like that, you'll be sent to our app, and you can just share the link on a Zoom chat or Google Meet chat, and you can start drawing. And I think that's usually the magical kind of moment of that frictionless experience of not only getting the other person into the same space, but also the kind of ease of use when you start using Eraser. There's no tutorial, there's no onboarding. It's we try to make it fairly obvious and intuitive. And I think once you have a couple of those under your belt, that kind of really easy experience of being able to express yourself in a way that's visual and not limited to just words. I think folks start slowly moving on to more real-time use cases like interviews, as well as eventually planning docs and documentation too.
Yeah, indeed. Well, definitely going to try it out. I'm actually going through your templates. If I created a board without signing in, how long does it stay shareable? Do you guys delete that after the fact?
No, it's forever. It's persistent.
Okay, nice. It's like the GitHub gist of it's better than GitHub gist at this point. Amazing.
Yeah. It's so if you it just becomes part of history. So you might want to hold on to that link too, though.
Yeah, might be hard to find, but yeah, I would say that the getting started, I'm a big fan of onboarding and shortening the steps to get to whatever the moment is. And the fact that I can just hit try now and I'm already starting it with Markdown and a board, I can start creating some diagrams. Also, the fact you give me some templates to start with. Now my brain's oh, cool. Let me just my first thing I'm going to do right now is create an org chart for the for my team to help, because we're currently hiring, and we basically need to fill in some gaps, and I need to clearly state what gaps we're trying to fill. But after this call, I'll create an org chart, and maybe I'll even share it with you, and you can recommend some engineers.
For sure. Yeah, you'd be surprised how often teams use us to create org charts and team structures. Those are popular concepts.
Awesome. Well, speaking of popular, I know this is going to get really popular after this episode. People are going to be signing up. Definitely try it out. Thanks, Shin, for coming and talk about Eraser. I did want to transition us to picks. So this is what we're jamming on, things that keep us going. I like to call them cleverly jam picks. And could be music, could be food, could be tech related. All of the above is pretty good. And if you don't mind, how about you go first, since you came in pretty prepared?
Sure. My pick is, we're currently going through a marketing website overhaul. And so spending a lot of time in a tool called Webflow, which is a WYSIWYG website builder that's, powerful and I think very popular. But, I think the beauty of it is that anybody can go in and make edits to the marketing copy, but it's not oversimplified. So, you can do a lot of powerful things. In our, upcoming website, we're going to have, 12 videos on our landing page. And, we're going to have a gallery site where, we actually embed the actual product as an iframe onto the marketing page. And so, it's powerful. At the same time, because it's easy to create one of these things, and there's, lots of Webflow developers in that ecosystem who you can hire for, $5K, $10K to do an entire website. I think you experiment more because you know that 6 months down the road, you could just do another website. And I think that's just kind of a new paradigm that Webflow has enabled.
Excellent. Yeah. I've considered Webflow multiple times, and I think our next homepage is going to be Webflow, to be quite honest. What I do like about it is that the designers can lead. So there's no sort of barrier of like, can we make this happen in code? It's actually, can you make it happen in Webflow is the answer I want you to answer. So that's the one enticing thing is like, I don't have a lot of these landing pages are amazing. And I don't have the thought to answer a lot of those questions as an engineer. And I love the fact that you can unlock a lot of stuff and kind of, in scary ways, like you could remove engineers from the equation to get something deployed, which is like I want to keep engineers happy, keep the dream alive, but also we do need to unblock stuff and ship.
Right. And I mean, I think it allows, engineers to focus on other things, right? Whether it's product or DevOps rather than, on the marketing website.
Excellent. Any other picks?
Second one might be, another software, which is Linear. Another one that we use a lot internally. It's a, next gen, ticket management tool. And, we initially adopted it because, as somebody who is, building productivity tools and, we like to think of ourselves as craftsmen. We saw Linear as kind of, raising the bar in that regard. And, it's been, true to its reputation as we've been using it, whether, it's performance or, keyboard-based flows, which, we ourselves are a big fan of it, Eraser, and the little details. Like, I'll give you an example. If you paste in a Loom link in an issue, it'll automatically unfurl into an embedded video player without having, installed a Loom integration or anything like that. It just knows to do that, right? And so there's been a lot of delightful, surprising moments, and I think that's what we aspire to infuse into Eraser as well. So it's kind of been a great opportunity to, be inspired.
Yeah, we're talking about Linear internally. We have a small engineering team, so not a lot of tooling we need today. So we're still mainly just using all native GitHub features as far as product management goes. But I do like what Linear's done, and they've seemed to have really exploded in sort of feature set in the last probably year, to be quite honest, because they've been around for a little bit. But yeah, definitely something I need to check out and see, try to stay up to speed, learning about Eraser today, Linear, Webflow. These are all things that I think at the end of the day, like the developer tool space is always unending of like ways to unlock and 10x folks. Because like the illusion of the 10x developer, I think it is a myth for solo engineers, but you can 10x developers by removing a hurdle out of the way. So whether it's your design system or whether it's productivity, like that's how you 10x. It's not actually getting people to work harder for you, work smarter.
Exactly.
Cool. I do have two picks. One pick is actually what I just had for lunch. So I've had this go-to, whenever I feel like I need like an extra push in the healthy realm. My favorite salad is kale, pumpkin seeds, and like Parmesan. It's like oil, salt, and pepper. It's not too bad. Like a little lemon juice. It makes me feel better about maybe like the chicken wings I had the night before. So when I feel like I'm going down a bad path, I can course correct by eating kale, at least for the rest of the week.
Yeah. Is it homemade or are you ordering it from a restaurant?
All homemade. So I did actually, there's a restaurant below when I used to work at Netlify in the Dog Patch. And it's like the La Fromagerie. And it's a cheese shop that sells wine as well, but they also do lunch. And this is a salad that they created, which is kale, Parmesan, pumpkin seeds, and then dried figs with like some bacon. And that's like my go-to. It's like I don't I don't pick salads for fun, but this one's pretty good. It's pretty hearty, and it's got like enough in there that makes me feel good about myself. So highly recommend, y'all. I don't really have a great recipe, but if you are in the dog patch, or if you're in San Francisco rather, La Fromagerie, which I'm sorry, my French is, the accent's not great, but order this salad. You'll enjoy it. The other pick I have is I'm a shoe fanatic. I'm not crazy. Like currently in the shot, I don't have shoes behind my head right now and on camera, but I have been a frequent visitor of StockX, and I like finding deals, and I am a big fan of these. Basically, since the pandemic, I think like the Nike Blazers got a revive. They reissued the 1977 style, and a lot of the kids are wearing them. I've got a couple pairs now, and I just ordered a new pair, which is like the orange sail, which it's like a style. Like I don't know how. I'm not that in the shoes. I understand how all this works, but usually they partner with a designer. So basically the Nike check is bigger than normal.
Oh, wow.
And like it's over like even the sole of the shoe. So I think it looks pretty cool. When I wear my San Francisco Giants shirt, like it matches the orange of my shoe. So I'm a big fan of it. And it's kind of under the radar right now. So I was able to get it for less than $100, a pair of size 12 men's.
Oh, wow.
So I think it's a cool style for something that's not blown up to the like the Air Jordan 1s. Those are kind of blown up to a place where unrealistic prices.
Sounds like it might appreciate in value in StockX in the future.
Yeah, and going back to the FinTech, the original conversation we started with, StockX is, I love how fascinating this is about sort of basically streetwear culture at this point, because they sell clothes now. But to be able to buy something for like, I don't really care about the value going up and down. I just care about if it's cost effective for me to buy it today, because I'm not going to resell shoes. I think shoes, there's like this whole meme about shoes are made to be worn. So like, I wear my shoes. And if I want another pair of shoes, I'll buy another pair of shoes. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that conversation, but yeah, that's my pick.
And StockX, I think, it's a great like example of unbundling of, like an eBay, right? And I think there's just going to be more as the internet economy, grows and advances.
Yeah. And I think specifically in dev tools, because like you mentioned Miro being the sort of the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, like Eraser is solving a problem for developers in a way that Miro can't do. Well, technically they can do, but their focus is so broad that they're getting mass adoption. So now it's just the landing and expanding. So yeah, we'll talk off here more about like what I'm working on, because I'm in a very similar position where we're focused, hyper focused on one problem that we can execute well on. But with that, thanks so much for the conversation, Shin.
Thanks for having me on.
Look forward to hearing more success out of Eraser, and listeners, keep spreading the jam. That's all we have time for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter @JAMstack Radio. This show is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com.